in hand at mid-river at this stage. 178 piles were required altogether, but the driving was very uniform. The piles were 50 feet long and square-ended. No pointed piles were used. The fine gravel to small shingle allowed this type of driving. Only one pile was cracked in the whole pole driving program, and this must have hit an isolated floater. The pile heads were capped by a pre-stressed skirt, and on this was cast in place a reinforced concrete stem. Special formwork was used, and also a special bucket for pouring the concrete into these narrow stem sections. The bridge trusses consisted of Calendar Hamilton steelwork, and this was shipped into Jackson's Bay, some 30 miles away, and then brought up by road to the Haast river bed. The trusses were assembled in sections of 50, 55 and 65 foot lengths to suit the various assembly programs, and these assembled sections were stockpiled in order of erection alongside the river. The bolts were tightened up by ordinary spanners, but the final tightening was done with impact wrenches so as to maintain a uniform stress in the high tensile bolts that were used for the work. The trusses were taken out to their site in the bridge on a special transporter made for the job. The bridge actually consists of 3 sections of continuous truss 720 feet long, with 2 passing bays 120 feet between them. The total length is 2,417 feet. The deck slabs were partly placed with this front end loader as shown here, but owing to the dry conditions and the easy working from the riverbed, a crane was used for most of the bridge to put these slabs in place. The slabs themselves had been cast at the Haast township and cast in long strips in the order in which they would be laid on the trusses to form the deck. While the bridge work was in hand, work was in hand on the road northwards from the bridge as well as southwards from the Paringa end. And by the time the bridge was fit to use, the road was metalled through Ship Creek to Bullock Creek. This left a 10-mile section of the worst country between Bullock Creek and the Wakapai River. The department's plant is working here, and the department did 6 miles of this 10-mile length, while the balance of 4 miles was done by contract, working from the Paringa end.
As I said, I worked for the Ministry of Works. I started in Christchurch at 16, and the normal thing then was that you could expect to have 2 years in Christchurch, and then you could expect to be transferred away. And at that time, it could have been anywhere in the Canterbury or Western region for doing engineering survey work of that type. Early in 1964, I was told that I was going to the West Coast. I'd been to Otira over the past, but I'd never been actually to Greymouth. So I'm given a rail ticket and I'm on the train. When I got to Greymouth, it's mid-afternoon, I called into the office there and I'm told, you're going to Haast. So the next morning I'm on an aeroplane out of Hokitika, and luckily there was a bloke on the plane, Archie Barrett, who was quite well known on the West Coast. I think ultimately he got killed down there in a road accident, but he knew all the landform down the West Coast. So I got a really good tour guide of the trip down from Hokitika, and then landed at Haast. That was mid-morning. Taken up to the Haast office of the Ministry of Works, which was basically a tin shed on the beach at Haast, and equipped with a mattress and an axe, and allocated a hut in the camp, and indicated that I should get hold of one of the two butchers in Cromwell to get a regular meat supply sent to me, and the fruit shop in Cromwell to get a regular fruit and veggie supply sent in. And so it was ordered in old terms. It was, I think, £1.10 or 30 shillings worth of meat a week, and a pound's worth of vegetables came in. And that was, you basically had that to survive on. The Ministry of Works had a canteen there which sold mainly dry goods, tinned food, that sort of thing, and they also had bread. And you left an order and they would put that out for you. There was a small store over the road, and you could buy some grocery lines there, but not much, and of course at great price compared to, say, anywhere else at that time, just because of the remoteness. It was an effort to get to work, but it was sort of, I suppose in this day and age, you'd regard it as quite a pleasure. I mean, walking up the beach for probably 3 or 4 kilometres, and then climbing up a couple hundred metres up from the beach up onto the road line. Early on it was a real chore, but when you got fitted to it, when I got fitted to it, it was quite enjoyable. And that's one thing that I do remember particularly, is that I wasn't especially fit. I'd been out of school for a couple of years and working, but a lot of young people, I suppose, when you stop school, you stop doing phys ed, and apart from biking to work and that sort of thing, but that was a bit of a shock, because I found that at the end of the day I was absolutely drained. I got home and I felt physically weak, and I'd have to get the fire going and get some tea on and get well fed, hopefully, and also of course I had to get up early enough in the morning to get the fire going to have a decent breakfast, because I found that if I didn't, I was physically sort of exhausted. I just felt weak by the end of the day. But after a month or two of that, of course, I learned A, how to eat properly, and know that to take on enough food, and B, I was getting fitter, because we were walking for miles. And walking up the beach in the sand, for instance, I mean, even if the sand's wet and the tide's low, it's not that easy to walk. And often we carried gear. We'd have sometimes picks and shovels if we had to dig holes and do sort of find where the rock was or that sort of thing. We had to carry bundles of pegs up the head of the machine so that we could set the road out for them. We had to carry the survey instruments sometimes in and out, although they stayed in the bush. We just parked them under a bank somewhere, and they would just sit there, and nobody there. We came back, there was nobody was going to get near them and flog them. They were a long way from anywhere, if in fact they could find them. And essentially, all those big cuts you see, the top edge of those was set out generally for a start. We knew where the top had to be so that the road finished up in the right place at the bottom, and we put pegs in at the top, and then the leading bulldozer, or the bush clearing gang went in for a start. The trees were felled, and then the leading bulldozer cut along the top of the batter, that's to say the top of the bank on the side of the road that you see, and then they just cut their way down from there and until they got down to the final level of the road, so that it's not a random thing. It was designed and it was built, and so other than 1 or 2 changes that have been made necessary by slips and so on in subsequent years, because we are talking 30 years from when it was opened, and it took a while to build it as well, so that there's quite a few years have evolved, and really the road is largely as it was designed and as it was put onto the country.
There was a lot of discussion on where the road was to go. There was what they called the inland route and the coastal route. The inland route had big problems with, again, fault line and slipping country. And the final decision was made, had all the brass down to check it. And they actually took them through what they called the coastal route. They decided they wanted to fly this with a helicopter and show the brass where this actual road line was going to be. So they sent the boys through with a gas bottle and balloons. And you can imagine trying to blow up a balloon and let it up through the scrub. I don't know how many they got up. It wouldn't be very many. They'd hit a branch, and next thing, bang, and go another balloon. It was a dead loss, and the chopper shot through like a Bondi tram. They thought he could hover and let them have a look at where the various, they could see these odd balloons dotted through the scrub, and the boys are tearing ahead to try and get them all up. And he said they were no time at all. They were from one end of the job to the other, and thought, well, was that the road line we just shot through? And as soon as they went through there, they then realised just what they were going to open up and how much it was going to bring into tourism. And I think probably what broke the ice was when they went up round onto Knights Point and then went through there. Even though it was very, very rough country, they could see what the views were and what the long-term benefits were going to be. One of the more amusing things about the road opening was first of all, the picking of the opening site, where it was going to be, and then where the actual workforces were to meet up between the Own Forces Works construction gang coming up from Haast and the contractors heading south. So Knights Point was picked as the obvious place, being a ex-borrow pit. So this was all set up, and then we get this fine instruction coming down from Wellington via the Prime Minister, Mr. Keith Holyoake at the time, saying that at our own peril, if anyone beat him through the gap, he would not come down and open the road. So the fine instruction was issued to everyone: don't go through the gap ahead of Kiwi Keith, which was probably the wrong thing to say, because immediately everyone thought, well, he's not going to be the first through. So there were several, I won't name who, went through, and that was quite enjoyable. So anyway, Keith still opened the road thinking that he was the actual first official car through the gap. It was obvious that we weren't going to get the culvert built. We put in some, because of the high water flows, they were designed on a 6-inch runoff on a completely non-absorbent surface. So all the culverts were designed to take that sort of runoff, which meant that these culverts were something like 25 feet wide, 20 foot high, and it was obvious we weren't going to get Brescia Creek finished in time, so we had to put a bailey over the top, and that was to close it was made the official gap. And of course nothing ever runs true. A fella called Trevor Connor was on the dozer on the other side, and he was pushing up the approaches as we were tidying up the last of the decking and getting everything ready. And it just got to 9 o'clock and I couldn't see Trevor on the dozer, and I said to him, well, what do you reckon? He said, well, I'm going home, I don't know about you. So that was it. You know, no one was jumping up and down saying, thank heavens we're finished. They just said, well, thank God for that, we're away home. And of course then the next day, it broke, a real good day, just fell out of the sky. Got the road open, everyone got through to Haast, and the road closed behind us.
My mother and father moved down to Jacobs, and he got a job with the ministry and spent 40 years, starting off on horseback to go to the Cook River and then south to the Blue River. And sometimes he couldn't get home on account of flooding and that, so he'd have to spend a night in a camp or whatever, but he eventually made it back, and he done that for 20 odd years or more, and then all of a sudden the road started to move to be opened, and that's when George Gilligan come down with all the trucks. And that was the push from Fox to Paringa. And so okay, Dad retired the horse because it was only a one-way thing. He retired the horse and he got himself a push bike because he couldn't drive a vehicle. So that's how he went to work, and he still had to do that area, but not to the Blue, on account of the contractors coming in, you know, and doing the bottom end. But he still had to go north, checking on all the phones and wires and everything. He was working for Public Works in those days, not Ministry. Yeah, they were the first ones. Yeah, and he done that for 40 years before he was made redundant, and it was brilliant because I used to go out with him, you know, at odd times, and well, if you didn't have a good horse, well, you never made the river, or you wouldn't even attempt to go across. But if you had a good horse, well, okay, you just sat on there and put her in the water, and it was just like a boat, the way she'd go. Yeah, get you on the other side and keep on going. Yeah. Then I had a brother, Lou. He started off pretty well the same time as me, but he went into the surveying. And he was under Hal Cole, right from the start of the contracting down there and the opening of the road going through from Paringa. And he finished up over in Fiji after 2 or 3 years down here. And he done 40 years. So that was 2 of them. That was Dad and my brother Lou had done 40 years. I used to be in the silver pine, cutting silver pine, and Harold Cole said that one day when I was talking to him, there could be an opening for a truck on the Haast Paringa Road, see? And so I went away to work this day, and I said to my brother Thomas, I said, bugger it, I'm going to get myself a truck and take on contracting. And he said to me, he says, you want me to come with you? And I said, oh yeah, you might as well. So that's how we started, and that's how Rochford Brothers got a start. But nothing was concrete because they couldn't give you a concrete statement, you know, that you were going to be paid every day as long as you had a truck. That wasn't the way the ministry worked, or Public Works. They just said there was a start there. Okay, if you were game enough to have a go and you made it, fine. So I had 28, 30 odd years with the contracting, carting bridge material, pea metal, sand from Hunts Beach, Bruce Bay out to all the culverts on the Paringa section, and stockpiling pea metal in a pit that we named 56 because that was the number from Paringa out to there. I don't know whether it was culverts or pipes or what, but it was 56 anyhow. So we stockpiled all the pea metal in there, and then we put a pipeline into a creek and run the water back onto the truck, and it was loaded by loader onto the back of our truck, and I'd have to stand up there and just turn the hose on. There was a tap on the pipe, and I'd turn the hose on and wash all the sand and everything out. So you can imagine what I'd done to all the bearings and pins and bushes and that. Oh, I cut them out in no time, but it was still work. And I'd done that for just about all the culverts until then, once they got through, came the sealing. And on the first lot of the sealing, I carted all the seal for in a reserve tank for the sprayer, and that was my job from start to finish, right through. Yeah, right to the top of the pass. So there was a lot of miles run. Yeah. It was brilliant, and the guys I worked with, well, they were just absolutely fabulous. Brian Nixon, you couldn't get a better overseer than him. Ned Kelly, Norm McGeorge, they're all out there tonight. Ian Kenning, yeah, Ted Rose, yeah, brilliant guys to work under, you know. And if you done your work, well, okay, there was no worry. No, I had plenty of bad days, don't worry. Three punctures coming back from Fox. So that was the spare tyre, everything gone. So I was on the side of the road and had to fix three of them before I could get down to Paringa and drop me a load of timber. I have a lot of good memories of, you know, all the guys I have worked with. Yeah, and all the contractors were absolutely brilliant. Ron Ferguson, I stopped off one morning to say good day to him because we always had a yarn as we were going to work. We were working in different places, and I just left the truck ticking over. And I got out and I'm busy yarning, and all of a sudden I heard Ron sing out, "She's away!" And the truck had started to move, see, with the vibration of the motor ticking over, and she was taken off and she was heading for the culvert. So he made a dive and he grabbed it and stopped it from going into the creek. But he can't remember that, but I can, my oath, because otherwise I think that might have been the finish of Rochford Brothers. We wouldn't have the money to buy another one. Yeah, we'd only just started. Yeah, so I never done that again. Then once they decided that, okay, it was time to get an overseer down there, they said to me, well, okay, the truck goes, would you like to have a go at being an overseer? And I thought about it, and I went home and I said to Kay, my wife, will I or won't I? That meant because I would be parting company with my brother, and there'd be no more Rochford brothers. And anyhow, we yarned about it, and she says, why not? She says, you've done enough, I think, for Rochford brothers. So I did. I went back and I told the engineer, oh yeah, I'll have a go. You know, if I'm successful, right. And I was. So I was an overseer until they made me redundant. And my young fellow, Jimmy, I had him for 2.5 years, right at the dying stages of down there.
As a teenager, I was fortunate enough to be financed into the purchase of a truck and a licence, and enough 44-gallon drums of gas to get me down to Paringa, and we sort of started there. We had to ford the Paringa River in those days. That was before the Paringa Bridge was built. And we would have started in around about Jacobs River, I should think. It was certainly south of Paringa anyway. And we worked our way through from there.